Now, this is contrary to what you've heard in the industry, right? People are like, everybody says the real estate and the housing, a house is your biggest asset. A house is not your biggest asset. In fact, a house takes money out of your pocket. You see, a house has too many leaks. The house versus the multifamily. Over here, if you have your own single family home, you are working to pay off that mortgage versus the multifamily. You have multiple people going out there to work for you. This is the true meaning of having the money work for you, because you do the job once, and it's going to pay you for life. So, we talked about that $1 million plan, okay? And we're gonna start with where everyone likes to go, okay? People think about real estate, and really what comes to mind for a lot of people is that single family house. That single family house. Everybody says, I want that single family house. And I'm here to tell you, or share with you rather, that that single family house may not be the best investment. And it may not be the best investment at the beginning of your career. There is a time for that. There will be a time for you guys to buy houses and cars, but when you are in your 20s, okay, and early 30s, your future self, think about your future self and how is that future self going to be thanking you? The reason that I live the life that I live today is because of the decisions I made when I was in my early 20s, or of course all throughout my life, but specifically in my early 20s, because I am reaping the rewards of that. And so it's all about delayed gratification. Now, this is contrary to what you've heard in the industry, right? People are like, everybody says the real estate and the housing, a house is your biggest asset. And of course, there's a lot of books on how a house is not your biggest asset. In fact, a house takes money out of your pocket. You see, a house has too many leaks, okay? A house, you got to pay for repairs. You got to pay for the roof. You got to pay for the snow. You got to pay for the water bill. You got to pay the taxes. You got to pay the hydro. You got to pay the gas. You got to pay for the lawn. You got to pay for the rentals. If you're going to renovate the property, people are always like, oh, I want to do my bathroom, I want to do this, I want to do that. So ultimately, all of these are leaks, which it doesn't make sense. Now, if you are living in this house, and whoever the first person, I want you to, oh, I didn't talk about the mortgage. Mortgage, okay? And I'm sure I can go on and on and on and on all the different leaks that single family house has, okay? So one of you guys, you can unmute yourself and tell me who pays for all of these leaks.
You do.
Me?
Yeah, you.
The owner of the house, right? The owner of the house. The owner of the house, so if it's your own primary residence, you are the one that is paying for all of these expenses. And so what happens is when people buy a house too early, at the beginning of their career, or at the beginning of their investment career, they end up handcuffed to the house because now they have to go to a job. They have no choice to go to that job and be stuck there in maybe a job that you don't like, because you have all of these expenses and you can't even breathe. You can't even look at buying an investment property, because you are stuck. You are stuck paying for all of these things. There is no income, which is why buying a primary home for yourself at the very beginning, notice I said at the very beginning, it could be a massive liability and it could handcuff you for the next 5 to 10 years. Now, you could buy a house as a rental, okay? Here's the problem with that. You have one tenant, okay? One tenant. Let's say that tenant is giving you $2,000 a month, okay, in rent. Okay, let's make it $3,000 a month for this house, okay? What do you think the cash flow at the end of the month is going to be if with those $3,000 you have to now go and pay all of these expenses?
Wouldn't they pay their own utilities though, and then they would mow their own lawn and shovel their own snow as well?
Sure, good point. But do you have to pay the mortgage?
Mm-hmm.
Do you have to pay renovation and upkeep and property management? Do you have to pay taxes and water?
Yeah.
So going to buy a house as a rental, it's never a lucrative idea unless you already have money and you just need to park your money somewhere. Okay? At the beginning of your career, you need to maximize what you have. And some people already start with some resources. When I started, I didn't have any resources. I was pretty much starting from scratch. And so you need to use all of the resources that you have available. Now, here's the other thing, and I think it's the biggest factor of why the single family home doesn't work as an investment or even as an investment for yourself. Now, I'm talking to two different types of people. And you have to determine where you are in your investment as an investor. Are you someone that wants to be an investor, or are you happy being a consumer? Are you happy having that 40 hour a week job for the next 40 years of your life? Maybe you have a career. You don't need investment. So for those people, I would say buying their own personal house is actually a benefit, because it forces them to save. Even though you have all of these expenses, you are paying down a mortgage. And so from that perspective, if you had no other alternative, if you did not want to be an investor, if you did not want to get into real estate, and you just wanted to coast for the next 40 years, and you were not going to make an investment into real estate, then at that point I would say, yes, buying a house makes sense for a consumer. But I'm in a room full of investors and people that want to leave or create freedom or have a different life than the average 96% of the people out there. And the issue is that 96% of the people out there are sold a bill of goods, right? Everybody says, hey, buying a house is your biggest investment, your best investment. You buy that house and you hold on to it, and in 25 years it will be paid off, which is true. But they're not thinking about all of these leaks. So there's a reason why I buy. This is your house. I would go after multifamily. Okay? Multifamily. Okay? Multifamily, the house versus the multifamily. Now, we still have the leaks. We still have the leaks in the house. You still have the same leaks. You still have the same leaks. The multifamily, the triplex, the fourplex, the 5-plex, the 10-plex, the apartment building still has the same leaks as the single family house. Here's the difference. You have more income to pay for all of those expenses. The same expenses, right? If you had three single family homes, you have 3 roofs versus you buying a triplex, you have 1 roof. Here's another factor. The value of the single is based on comparables, which means to come up with a value, it's based on emotion, what people are feeling. So if people are excited at that time, if they're excited, let's say it's a time where everybody wants to buy real estate. It's a seller's market, for example. People become emotionally attached, and the way that they determine the value of that property is based on what other people are buying the property for in that particular street, neighborhood, whatever it is. And so basically, the way that they come up with the value of a single family home is based on emotion, which is the reason why the single family home is the most expensive piece of real estate you will ever buy. Now, over here with the multis, it's all based on the numbers. So one side based on emotions, how beautiful, how the grass is cut. The couples go to the house and they envision their whole family living there, and they walk around the house and they hold hands and they're like, honey, I think we're home. And that's how they will determine the value of that house and how much they're willing to pay for it, and also how much they can afford, versus the multifamily, where the value is determined based on the numbers. And it's basic business 101, economy of scale. The more units you have in a particular property, the lower the cost per unit. You guys know about Costco. You go to Costco, you buy in bulk. Why do you buy in bulk? Well, you get a lower cost per unit because you're buying in bulk. This is like shopping at Costco, right? You have more units in one area, on one piece of land, on one property. So you have more rents. You're collecting more rents, and now it becomes a business versus emotional. Now, if you're starting at a triplex, there is emotions involved because that's where the majority of the consumers are, the competition. But as you start to go up in numbers, it gets less and less emotional, and it becomes more and more like a business. Here's the other thing with multifamilies, okay? Multis. So, number one, easier to get funding, mortgage. First of all, the lender is looking at this particular transaction as a business as well. And they're seeing, can the business support itself? So, regardless of what you may think, because you are buying a higher valued asset, but it's actually easier for you to get financing. Well, how does that work? Well, when you're buying the single or even the duplex, the single and the duplex, the onesie and the twosie, the entire mortgage is based on your specific situation, your debt to income ratio, your income, your job stability, your credit history. It's all based on you and your ability to pay back this mortgage. Okay? So when they look at a single or a duplex, it's like, can you afford this property? 3 units and let's say between 3 to 5 units. We're calling this residential multifamily. But you can still get a residential mortgage. They will take you into consideration, of course, and there is debt to income ratio. By now, they're going to take the income of the property. So let's say you have 4 or 5 units or 3 units. They'll take that income and they'll take half of it and they'll add it to your income to help you qualify for a bigger asset. And we'll have a case study in just a moment when I pull up the PowerPoint. And so it's actually easier to buy bigger. Now, commercial real estate, we're talking about, anything above 5 units, depending on the bank. Some banks look at 6 even as a residential, but at the end of the day, we're talking about commercial financing. Is very much dependent on the asset itself. So the asset's performance determines of whether or not you're going to get that funding. And believe it or not, guys, it's easier for me to buy a $10 million property than it is if I'm going to go buy a single family house. Because that single family house is dependent on my debt to income ratio versus if I'm buying a building is dependent on the performance of the building. Because at the end of the day, you are buying a business. And so on the financing side, it's easier. It's easier to manage. When people say, hey, I'm buying a duplex, I think like, ooh, it's a lot of work, right? For example, we talked about the amount of leaks a small deal has. Like the single has all of these expenses, okay? When someone moves out, so that $3,000 is no longer coming in, you are now 100% vacant. And at this point, you are now struggling to pay all of these expenses. You may even get a little desperate and put in the wrong person because, you know what? You need to cover all of these expenses. When someone moves out of my, for example, 50-unit apartment building, it's a non-event. There's probably people moving out of one of my buildings right now, and I don't even know about it. If someone moved out of your single family home, that's all you're thinking about. That's all you're going to be focused on until you rent it. Here's the other thing. Remember this concept here? Multifamily, you still have the same amount of expenses, but you have more income to cover those expenses. And because there's more income, now you can afford for other people to manage your property. There's more money there available for someone else to manage that property. So in terms of the management, it becomes easier to manage. So less time. Contrary to what people tell you, when you share with people that you want to buy apartment buildings, I'm sure people think to themselves, "Oh my God, I can't imagine, you managing that. I can't imagine someone managing all of these expenses with no income coming in." And so it's easier to finance, easier to manage, easier to manage, and ultimately, it will give you freedom. It will give you the freedom that you need, because now, if you accumulate a portfolio, you start building a portfolio, and that's what I'm going to show you in just a moment. You start building a portfolio of assets that are income generating. They're income generating assets. At one point in time, you will get to choose. You will have the opportunity to choose on whether or not you are going to continue to go to your job, or you get the luxury of choosing what you want to do with your life versus going to a job for the next 40 years of your life, and you may not like that job, but you have no choice because you have You have all of these expenses is what handcuffs people to their job. And so the real true meaning of freedom is for your passive income, right? So if you have to go to a job, that's active income. You are actively going to that job, okay? Even a business, you're actively, if it requires your time, you're actively pursuing that money. That means it's going to require your time. And so the reason you have to do that and you're handcuffed to that is because you have all of these expenses. You are handcuffed to that. And so over here, the asset pays, right? The asset pays for all these expenses, and there's going to be some cash flow left over, and that cash flow, along with the equity in time, is what will give you the freedom. Also, over here, if you have your own single family home, you are working to pay off that mortgage. You are working to pay off that mortgage. Most people have a house, can't do anything, can't go on vacation. You know, they take one vacation a year, they go and spend all this money, and then that's it. They're tapped out. They're tapped out on the amount of the vacations they can take because they are working to pay down that mortgage. Versus the multifamily, you have multiple people going out there to work for you. This is the true meaning of having the money work for you, because you do the job once, and it's going to pay you for life. It's going to pay you for life. And so at the very beginning, you may have to figure out how to get in the game. You may need to, you may need to do some joint venture partnerships. You may need to figure out, maybe you can tap into other people's resources. We talked about that many times here. But you have to figure out how to get in the game.